Our top story today, while the president returns from overseas, House Democrats carry out his plans to officially authorize war against the Islamic State. It has been several months since U.S. soldiers deployed to Iraq and Syria, with repeated promises from the White House that no American boots would ever touch the ground. Now we have over 1,200 soldiers in those countries, and no doubt more to come in the months ahead. If Obama's war plan goes through Congress, the military could hold a draft and summon Americans to join the armed forces. This would also allow the president to authorize ground troops without congressional approval. This battle against ISIS has lost a lot of traction in the public eye, but it's about to go right back to the front page of the headlines. President Obama's approval ratings plunged to their lowest point in his tenure shortly after he approved airstrikes in Syria. And ever since he approved military action in Iraq and Syria, the president has continued to authorize the strikes under George W. Bush's old Iraq war bill. That very piece of legislation is the one that helped propel the president into the White House. And now he is on the verge of signing a similar law that would approve military action in 2 countries. And while it's not an official law yet, labeling the action against the Islamic State doesn't even technically confine it inside any of national borders. This military authorization is already sparking hot debates in Washington, and it is sure to change America's image around the globe. In related news, another top story today, a group called the Freedom House just released a new study evaluating the state of freedom around the world. It comes out every year, and this year, the Global Freedom House report says that freedom took a step back in 61 countries around the world this year. Now, keep in mind that much of this is very subjective. It takes a whole host of things into account, like border disputes, terrorist attacks, and civil rights, and it weighs them in contrast to other countries. The U.S. ranked as high as possible on the freedom scale. Every Western ally also measured very high on the scale. Meanwhile, Russia took a step back. Iran, Saudi Arabia, China, and Iraq all ranking near the bottom of the list. This is the 9th year in a row that the Freedom House reports a decline in global democracy. Back on Capitol Hill, the president makes his final plans to announce Loretta Lynch as the next Attorney General. Lynch would replace longtime Obama aide Eric Holder, the man responsible for Fast and Furious, a gun-running scandal that cost several American lives along the Mexican border. While the GOP-controlled Congress is expected to confirm Lynch as the next AG, now we're learning that they're going to teach her a lesson while they're at it. They plan to do that by making an example out of Holder, trotting him out in front of a federal trial to answer tough questions about abuse of power and what you might call crafty interpretations of the law. One Judiciary Committee senator said, "The justice system is broken, and we want to know how Loretta Lynch would fix it." Well, speaking of the Justice Department, the Wall Street Journal reports that the DOJ has been spying on American citizens for years. Well, that much we already know, but it's how they have been tracking citizens. The report accuses the DAA of carrying out a full-scale surveillance program on the U.S. highway system. Cameras and computers capturing and storing all of your cars, videos and still images of drivers and their license plates. According to government documents, the feds have used this spy program to seize billions of dollars worth of cars, cash, and drugs. The whole plot started out near the Mexico border in an effort to battle the drug cartels. But now it has expanded all throughout the country, and the feds are sharing all of that information with the local police departments as well. And as you can imagine, the folks over at the ACLU are fighting this in court, fighting expanded government surveillance and protecting the privacy of the American commuter. It's not just license plate scammers either. Many of these cameras are equipped with facial recognition software, and privacy advocates are extremely concerned with the knowledge that the government is currently watching, recording, and tracking every move of its citizens. This fight will continue in the American court system, and the one big question, is it constitutional?
Throwing rocks and petrol bombs at police, protesters stormed the streets in Kosovo. Over 2,000 people rallied against Prime Minister Isa Mustafa's political agenda. Arguments over the property of a mine, along with remarks made by an ethnic Serb cabinet minister, sparked the outburst of violence. Mustafa had pledged previously that the Kosovo government would take over the Trepka mine. After Serbia showed outrage over their share of the mine, Mustafa took back on his promise in fear of possible repercussions. Now that the mine faces shutdown, 20,000 people fear for their unemployment. Protesters have also asked for the removal of an ethnic Serb minister, who recently referred to a group of Albanians as savages. Police officers used rubber bullets and tear gas to disperse the rallies. More than 120 people have been arrested so far. Kosovo hasn't seen this much unrest since 2008, when the former Serbian province seceded. Protests continue in Mexico after 43 students were murdered by an alleged drug cartel. The Mexican government has kept predominantly quiet regarding the deaths up until now. The head of the Criminal Investigation Agency, Tomas Cerrone, announced the students were killed because they were thought to be part of a rival gang in the area. Demonstrations continue to rock the streets in Mexican city of Iguala as the investigation continues. The government has been accused of closing the case before it was solved properly. One parent says, "We don't have enough evidence to accept this." Multiple arrests have been made, including the mayor of Iguala and a member of the gang Los Rojos. As the investigation into AirAsia Flight 8501 comes to an end, so does the search. Indonesia's head of civilian search and rescue announced that the search for the victims may end this week. The retrieval of the airliner's fuselage has also been suspended. According to the chief of the National Search and Rescue Agency, after 7 days, we will evaluate whether the operation will be extended or shut down. Authorities had previously thought that more bodies were inside of the fuselage, but the military now says that is no longer the case. Officials say they have told the families of the victims the possible deadline, and there is overall understanding. Starvation is on the rise in Iraq. Refugees in many areas are in the midst of a food shortage crisis. A spokesperson for the World Food Program says, "We are gravely concerned about food security and the humanitarian situation." Many Iraqis have found shelter in abandoned buildings and mosques. Families are migrating to the south since violence continues to rattle northern Iraq. Refugees struggle to afford food after spending most of their savings on transportation out of war-torn areas. Over 2 million Iraqis have been displaced from their homes, and only 1 million of them are receiving aid.